Want to wrestle?
Oh, baby, do it, baby. Oh, baby, move it, baby.
That's fine. You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
When I die, it'll be here or on top of a wild woman. I hope it's here, but I'll go either way.
What would I do without you?
We'll do it live. Okay. We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live.
Well, what do you want to do then? I want to dance.
I can't help it that I'm custom made. I can't help it that I look good, smell good, can't dance all night long. There's one part of our bodies that's soft, and it ain't soft all the time. If you catch my meaning, Ric Flair, New York City Ric Flair, you're gonna find out what hard is all about. Because from the time I get to ring with you, Cappy, it's gonna be a hard night, all night long. And you can forget about your limousine, your pretty girls, and your diamond rings. Cause they don't mean diddly do squat when I get done with you. When I get done with you, things bound to be closed for repairs.
Oh, baby, do it, baby. Oh, baby, move it, baby.
Yeah, 5, 4, 3.
Everybody get your hands. We can dance, everybody take the time.
Alrighty, welcome back. We are live and on the air. And as you could tell from the intro song, we are dancing our way into the Wrestlemania quicker than anything. I tell you what, we only got a couple weeks left. Everything's working itself out. We got a brand new twist, thanks to courtesy of Triple H, leading into the main event. Kind of a swerve, kind of not. Just legitimizes Daniel Bryan making it to the championship match. But we're going to get into that here in a little bit. But yeah, actually that song. In coming up with the songs, I just want to go ahead and tell you fans. By the way, I'm Trent. The Appalachia Warrior. My co-host Marquez will be with us here shortly. But when I come up with these songs to start the show off with, I try to pick something from either like a current podcast, be it like JR, Steve Austin's, Chris Jericho's, Cole Cabana's, Justin and the Incredibles, somebody's. If somebody has a quote that just, kicks something in my head, and I'm like, wow, yeah, I could totally just utilize that to frame the conversation around, I go for it. And with this one, funny enough, it was Dustin Rhodes, good old Goldust, dancing, making fun of Fandango on Monday night. And I was like, well, it's kind of fitting because we are dancing our way into WrestleMania. So we're going to, I felt like we needed to carry that theme forward. So, yeah, tonight's show, man. Wow, we got a lot to talk about. And tonight's episode is aptly titled "Dancing with the One That Brought You," and really that's going to be dealing with TNA, which we're going to be dealing with throughout the show on various levels. But we'll get to that as well. But let's go ahead and jump into the 120 seconds around the wrestling universe. This is all the news that you need to know, or at least the most recent news. And let's start that off with UFC star Ronda Rousey. She's just not happy beating the dog piss out of women in the UFC. She has made it known that she wants to be a part of WrestleMania 31. I don't know who she take on. I don't know if it would translate out well, but it damn sure be interesting to watch. I'll tell you that much. Also, let's keep with the UFC. Chael Sonnen told TMZ that he wants to buy the WWE when he retires from MMA fighting. Now, I don't know how much money that the dude's got, but I don't think it's anywhere near that whole $1 billion plateau that the WWE is worth. But who knows? Obviously he could get some backers or something. I don't know. It'd be interesting. But his reps told TMZ that he's not joking and has already met with bigwig friends in the investment world to enact his takeover. And of course, the WWE released this quote: We are a publicly traded company, so Chael is more than welcome to purchase shares of WWE stock and become one of our valued shareholders. There's a huge difference in being a shareholder and owning the whole thing. So yeah, I'm curious to see how that plays out. But let's move on. ProWrestlingInsider.com has reported that the new Queens of Combat Wrestling promotion will officially debut this coming Friday with an pay-per-view on highspots.tv. The pay-per-view will take place from Club Hush in Charlotte, North Carolina. Actually, I've been down that way. It's pretty country out that way. The following talent has already been announced for the event: Taylor Hendricks, Soho Bolt, Amber O'Neil, Kimberly, Mickey Knuckles, Leva Bates, Amanda Rodriguez, and Heather Owens. Now, let's switch the channel right quick over to some TNA news. Jason Powell over at ProWrestling.net is reporting that TNA will be running 3 shows in the Hammerstein Ballroom in New York over the summer. Now, this is in large part due to the fact that where they take down in Orlando, they've been overbooked throughout the summer, so it's forced TNA to seek out alternatives. Now, the problem with this is the hefty price tag. For 3 shows, it's going to cost $300,000 in production costs. Now, they can and they are going to try and work a deal out where they can tape multiple shows, like they'll tape like 3 shows per day to cut costs. So really, it's going to be like what they did over in England in taping, just 4 weeks worth of shows, and then just broadcast them week to week. The only problem with that, and something else we're going to talk about later, is the continuity of which, because TNA, when it comes to the continuity of who's holding the belts, who's injured, this, that, and the other, they're they're a little suspect. They got to put in their homework and do something about that. So it'll be interesting how that plays out later on in the summer. Now, TNA and Spike TV have still not signed up for another TV deal, possibly due to the WWE deal still being negotiated and some of TNA's key ratings remaining the same as when previously signing the deal. It should be noted that the last time TNA and Spike TV signed a TV deal, they wanted to improve ratings and viewerships as a key aim. This obviously hasn't happened, as noted on .net. One wonders whether this is an attempt to potentially impress Spike TV. Now, the problem with that, really, is Spike TV has, forced TNA into certain situations, like doing the cross promotions with UFC, as well as other aspects. And, of course, TNA is going to bow down to their wishes, and they have many times over, and much to their detriment, I feel. But so I don't see. I just see this as just being one of those ridiculous rumor kind of deals. I mean, there's probably some truth to this, but as in regard to Spike TV getting rid of TNA, why would you? They don't have any other content that they would want to fill that slot on a Thursday night, nor are they going to get the ratings, through said show that TNA does get. So, or the fringe benefit, as it were, that TNA, helps Spike TV by doing these cross, market promotions. So, and this kind of thing keeps surfacing. It's been surfacing over the past 3 years at least. Actually, upwards 4 years, 5 years. I don't have the specific time frame of which, but it keeps recurring and nothing ever happens. So I'm a little bit leery of that, and I think you should be as well. I wouldn't pay much attention to it. Now, here is something very interesting and something we talked about. I believe it was in the first podcast, but and there was not really much traction behind it then, but it seems like this issue is growing traction now. WWE.com has posted an article asking if WWE is ready for a six-man tag team championship. The article features quotes from various WWE superstars giving their thoughts about this possibility. However, it should be noted that there are currently no plans to introduce such a championship in WWE. One that was previously seen in promotions like World Class Championship Wrestling, the National Wrestling Alliance, and the AWA. And really, I mean, to be more specific about it, you go back to Devastation Inc., you go back to the Von Erichs, the Freebirds. I mean, the six-man tag team championship belt, when it was utilized and utilized well, it was a brilliant device, and it allowed the athletes to showcase themselves in a larger respect than what the singles at the time was allowing, without pigeonholing them into a tag team division that was still up and coming, because a lot of those that came through did just that. They made a stop in like WCCW, or made a stop in Georgia Championship, or made a stop in USWA, and then they moved on to wherever the money would take them. So, the belt kept getting passed and passed and passed. And that clearly delegitimizes the belt in and of itself. But there, too, it hurts your overall, tag team division, because who are you going to feud with? Who are you going to, put as, to prop the division up on? So that's why, specifically with the Von Erichs or even the Freebirds, they were hungry for it. In fact, Michael PSA's back, early 80s, when he was jumping around from AWA, WCCW, NWA, USWA, or Mid-South rather, he would say, put the belt on me. I want it, and I will build off of this. I will build your company off of this. Now, to have someone come in and do that, on the one hand, you're like, wow, really? That's kind of egotistical. But on the other hand, you got to respect it, because if someone is going to commit to you like that, you give them the opportunity. But see, back in the regional days, just to share this right quick, they only put the belts on family members, if not the booker of the territory, because they didn't trust anyone else to to defend the belt or to pass the belt on when it needed to be passed on. So it primarily stayed within the family. But anyway, let's digress back to the news. I think this would be a beautiful idea. I know that there's too many belts in the WWE as is, and they're not being properly utilized, but that's been true with the WWE for years. But something like this, especially in this modern climate, there is a decent tag team division out there right now, which is surprising. Even with Curtis Axel and can't think of his. Anyway, you know who I'm talking about. with them jobbing and the Usos going down on Monday, that was kind of crazy. That was an interesting twist. There is a strong Ryback. That's who it was. Sorry, brain fart. Um, but there is a decent sized tag team division in the WWE that you haven't seen in years. So right now, I think if they were going to do this, the timing would be perfect for it. But let's get back to the news. Also, and we're going to stay with the WWE. At last night's Raw, there was no footage of CM Punk versus The Undertaker in the video package that Paul Heyman presented, showing Taker's recent WrestleMania matches against Brock Lesnar, against people Brock Lesnar had ultimately dominated. It was also said that Triple H's line to Daniel Bryan about not taking your ball and going home was a shot at Punk. Now, it's a cheap ploy, and I actually believe this to be true because Triple H was pissed. And in certain respects, he had that right to be pissed because CM Punk was one of your go-to guys. You cultivated his talent and you put him in the limelight and, you build him up. And on top of which, you spend X amount of money, developing merchandise for him. And then just for him, for whatever reason, I'm not taking a side on this. I'm just saying I understand the Triple H's perspective. For him just to walk out on you like that, yeah, Triple H, I can understand why he would hold a grudge. In fact, Vince used to. Back through the early 80s into the 90s and even into the new millennium. The beginning of the new millennium, then that's when he started to just change his tune. When that ego and that you slighted me, I'm going to ruin you, blacklist you, whatever, just kind of got dampened down a bit. So I can understand Triple H deciding this, and I do believe that this was true and it was a jab at CM Punk. But if you watched Sunday night. Phil looked great. He looked great on The Talking Dead, and he said that he feels like a brand new man, and he really looks at it. And I wish him all the best of luck, and if he comes back, he'll be great. I don't see it happening. I definitely don't see it happening before WrestleMania. But if he was to come back, it would have to be WrestleMania. Otherwise, it's a opportunity lost. But ultimately, it's on him to decide when and how he does come back. So, but all right, I hate doing this, but some of you guys love it, and you feed off of it, and I keep saying this every week. And anyways, all right, as of right now, last night's episode of WWE Raw drew 4.08 million viewers and a 1.4 rating among the 18 to 49 demographic. Those numbers are down 7% and a tenth from last week's 4.37 million viewers and a 1.5. Despite being the lowest rated Raw of the year, the show still won the night among cable programs in the demo. It did hours of 4 million viewers and then 4.17 million and finally 4.05 million. I mean, ultimately, your numbers aren't going to stay, they're not going to stay consistent. It's never going to happen. And that's why I don't lend much credit to that, or it's just, you look at more at the money than the ratings. And I mean, yeah, you have people whose lives are, decided by a rating point or two, but that's not what wrestling is, and it's not going to be what wrestling's about, because you're going to have those lulls, you're going to have those high peaks, and you're going to have those low valleys. It just happens. But all right, so that's the news, and we got you up to speed on that. Let me go ahead and bring in my co-host for the evening, Marquez. Are you there, sir?
Yes, I am.
Welcome aboard, sir. How are we doing tonight?
No complaints.
Excellent.
Well, maybe one complaint, but we'll get to that later.
Okay, sounds good. All right, well, let's just jump right into it. We're going to start off with the WWE. And so, what do you think about Raw?
There were some interesting points. The key thing that I would say that I have a complaint about would probably be the show's opener with the new stipulation to the main event, possibly in WrestleMania 30.
Okay, go ahead and tell me why.
Okay, now for those of you who don't know, the match that was set was pretty much Randy Orton versus Dave Batista, which nobody was particularly thrilled about. We wanted Daniel Bryan in the match, and they found a way to make that happen. If he were to win a match against Triple H in the same night. Now, as of last night, an additional stipulation has been added where if Triple H wins that match, then he will be added to this triple threat match. I don't feel like the stakes really needed to be heightened. And on top of that, who the hell wants to see Triple H as champion?
Okay, well, let me jump in on this. And really, I mean, it's a foregone conclusion among anybody and everybody that Daniel Bryan will defeat Triple H and go into the main event. And that's why Triple H had to do that. Because the WWE, as you already know, Marquez and fans listening, the WWE has been notoriously known for predictable matches. You knew going in. And what makes it worse is I think it's worse now, and Marquez, you can chime in on this here in a second because I do want to get your thoughts on it. I think it's worse now than what it was back during the territorial days where you would have your stars come in and do a squash match against a couple jobbers. You know,
I can't argue with that because of Kofi Kingston's match last night. You knew immediately he wasn't going to beat Bray Wyatt.
well, Curtis Axel and Ryback as well. You know, but you're killing momentum and you're killing guys' careers because
Yeah.
and I mean ultimately you're under the misperception that yeah you can have them take a clean loss and down the road just build them back up, but can you? And if we go from a historical standpoint, very rarely. So
And I would say that taps into the WWE's larger problem, which is that they seem to think that their fan base forgets everything that happened a week ago, and we don't.
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, because I mean, it's leaked out several times that Triple H, in taking over certain aspects of the business, I mean, ultimately he still has to clear it through Vince, and rightfully so. But with some of the stuff, he's been like, yeah, they're not going to remember. And that's just an insult on our intelligence. And I've talked about this in previous podcasts, and it's the same thing. And I don't understand that mentality because A, we do remember, and B, you can't take someone and with something like the example I'm going to give later on is TNA's doing it as well because they're just trying to follow that WWE business model. In that, so on Thursday night's Impact, your tag team champions, along with Zema Ion, get just wiped out by an enraged Bully Ray. And so, how are they going to be, able to bounce back from that? And I got into a fight on Twitter with TNA Creative. I was actually nice about it with them. I'm not going to be nice tonight, but that's going to be in my weekly rant. And yeah, but I don't understand the need to do that because if you're going to squash someone and just squash them outright, you killed their career. You might as well just send them down to OVW or to NXT and let them stay there for a couple years, then come back, and maybe at that point they'll have a legitimate chance at a serious run. But
Or a better question, like what happened to the days where you just bring in like local talent and have them put in like a little bit of a job?
that's actually a good question, and the only answer that needs to be given, because it's the only one that matters, ratings. They have been forced, and see, you have to look at it from a historical perspective. This whole this whole main event type matches every week, as opposed to maybe once or twice a month leading into your pay-per-view, has only been around for the past 15 years, roughly.
Yeah,
And
probably as a result of the Monday Night Wars.
no, well, yes and no. It was going on prior to it because they were wanting to build ratings and they were trying to solidify the WWE as well as the WCW. They were trying to solidify their base. And then trying to solidify their base, the base became smart. And then also you have to throw in the internet age as well into this conversation because the fans transitioned away from being casual fans and not needing to know what was going to take place to wanting to know. And that's why, all your fans now, they're smarts. They are smart fans. And so they know everything that goes on. And because of which you have to build it to that next level to draw them in with something more elaborate, something more fantastical in order to compensate for them knowing how the stories are going to play out prior to watching them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, and yeah, this is, this type of thing has been going on for roughly 15 years, give or take, I would say about 3 years. And but prior to that, no, you did have that very same scenario that you were talking about, whereas you just brought in a couple local talents. In fact, back in the day, Honky Tonk Man talked about it in one of his many shoot videos on YouTube. If it was a TV taping, the guy that they brought in got paid more than the actual wrestler, but the wrestler will always say, here's your money. It's good money, like $500, something like that, and sometimes more than that. It just depends. But here you're making good money for a 10-minute match. Just make me look good. And so it's that used to take place, but it can't now, and it won't now because the fans want bigger and better and more elaborate stories, which also leads more to the downside, like you've seen with let's tie this back in with Monday Night Raw, and then it could be done with TNA as well, where you only had 2 matches in like the first hour, and the rest of the time was this back and forth or backstage interviews, stuff like that. These lead-in segments or lead-out segments, and it just kills it because this is wrestling. This isn't some soap opera TV. But the sport has evolved, and
we get it in the sense that you have to build the momentum or the attention drawn to the matches that will take place. But just this past Monday, most of the stuff that we saw in those segments had nothing to do with the show in and of itself. It was more along the lines of stuff that's going to be happening at WrestleMania, which, if you were doing a decent enough job, you wouldn't really have to sell it nearly as hard as you're trying right now.
Well, here's the thing. You go back, let me think. It wasn't until, I believe, WrestleMania, 15, 16, 17, I think, around in that era. Up until that point, leading into a WrestleMania, and just to use this as an example, a microcosm of something else that was greater in nature. Up until that point, you just sold your 2 big matches leading into a WrestleMania, and then everything else was just bonus. But the emphasis was placed on like the Hogan taking on Andre, or Hogan Mr. T versus Roddy Piper, and stuff like that. You only saw the hype build up between the 2 core matches that was to define WrestleMania. But then, as the business has evolved around, again, WrestleMania 15 through 17, somewhere along those lines, and you can jump on WWE Network and watch them and see how much, watch those shows leading into uh, your pay-per-view, you can see how it's progressed to where every match had to be of height in on that level and just given that much weight as a main event type match. You didn't have those just gimme kind of matches. Like Coco Beware versus who did he take on? Honky Tonk, I believe it was. Or these matches that are just they're sideshow acts. They're mid card matches, but they're meant to be that. They're a filler to get you to the main event. And as long as they're entertaining, they serve their purpose. But then you get to the point where you can't really have that many filler matches because it kills the pacing. It kills the buzz, the pop that's coming from the audience, which ultimately, impacts the wrestlers in the ring because that's how they gauge their success while they're out there. And if they got to push a little bit harder or pull back a little bit, just so that it doesn't pop too big, and then there's no room for it to grow with the following match. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah. The business has evolved, since then, and that's why we have this kind of situation going on. I do agree with you that, and it was a cold open. It was absolutely a cold open where right off the bat they're in the ring, to start Raw, and they're just going back and forth. And I almost turned the channel. It was that insufferable to watch Randy Orton and Batista just going at each other. It served no real purpose until Triple H got up in there, and it was painful.
Until we start talking about the show closer. Oh boy. Because both the opening and the closing for me, if I had to sum it up in just one sentence, I would have to say they represent the absolute worst aspects of the Attitude Era, which is just people talking endlessly with next to no meaningful action taking place.
Well, we'll get to that, but so say that because I think we're going to disagree on this, and I'm okay to disagree on this, but we'll get to that. All right, so with Triple H doing that, let's get back on point. With Triple H doing that, he had to do that. I mean, just to legitimize Daniel Bryan, and just to throw that little inkling of doubt that maybe, just maybe, Daniel Bryan won't win in the match that everybody knows he's going to, and therefore, Triple H would advance. And I kind of liked it. I honestly kind of liked it because to see Evolution, go full circle and just take on each other one more time on the granddaddy of them all, I would watch that match. Is it the kind of main event match I want personally for WrestleMania 30? Not so much, but it could still be a hell of a match because if history is if we could draw anything from the past history of Triple H, Batista, and Randy Orton taking on one another, it's going to be a hell of a match. Granted, I know Batista can't go more than 10 minutes. He doesn't have
that fact. Yeah.
He doesn't have the cardio, and actually, I don't think it's so much the lack of cardio training. I just think it's those skinny jeans. It's just cutting off that circulation of oxygen.
Nobody's gonna let him off the hook on that.
Hell no.
Oh man, it's not that you dress poorly; it's that you dress obnoxiously.
Dude,
why are you dressing?
Dude, he's wearing a shirt from Baby Gap. All right, for God's sake.
Meanwhile, you've got a guy that comes out in a fucking Jimmy John shirt, and he looks like he'll murder you.
Right. I know. All right, well, let's move on because we can't get stuck on, one topic because we got so much else to cover. All right.
That Usos match.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
Oh, man, I loved it, and yet at the same time, I'm not entirely sure where this is going to go, which, again, adds to the reason why I kind of love it.
Yeah, I love the unpredictable nature. And actually, leading into this, news has surfaced as of late last night, early this morning, that WWE Creative is at the point now where they're pissed off at the fans, trying to be smart. So they're of the mindset to screw with them. You know, just throw these curves at them. And honestly, if it takes you to get pissed off at the fans to do your job and to do it well, then please, by God, by all means, get pissed off. Because up until now, for the past 7, 10 years, it's been cookie cutter matches. Well, longer than that, but there's been hit or miss moments where they could work a swerve in and it translated out, but it wasn't sustained. So, and God, I mean, Jesus Christ, look back on this past year. How many writers actually quit the WWE because they couldn't handle the pressure? There's been more than a handful that I can come up with. But they're hiring Hollywood writers that don't know the sport.
Booking could fix this.
Do what?
Like long-term booking could really fix this.
Long-term booking? What do you mean?
Okay. That was actually, and this is harkening back to the article that I wrote, one of the major complaints that Phil had before leaving, which is that instead of just planning out all of their major matches in some capacity like a year in advance, they were pretty much playing things by ear, trying to feel things out, and then just like picking things up and dropping them as they went along. That's the reason why we got things like Daniel Bryan joining the Wyatts and then all of a sudden quitting the Wyatts.
Well, sure, but ultimately, and I mean, I get that, and this might be something that we agreed to disagree upon as well. You can't book it like that because the fans, wrestling by its very nature is organic. It comes, and we covered this 2 podcasts ago. Asterisk, card subject to change, and that allows you that freedom to hear the fans, gauge what you do creatively off of which you have to, because if you just keep trying to force feed a given story down their throat, and it's going to translate into less ticket sales, less ratings, less merch sold, and the fans are just going to turn away. They're going to look for something else. Because, I mean, you don't have these casual fans anymore that you can pick up and lose, but pick up again down the road. It's either they are with you or they're against you. And that's something that the WWE is struggling conceptually in dealing with right now. And that's why, yes, you've had your Daniel Bryan, join the Wyatts, and then it got shut down a month ahead of time, but really that actually wasn't supposed to play out until later on, but due to other circumstances going on both backstage as well as in ring with injuries and whatnot, they had to push that. So I mean, there's a lot of contributing factors to this sort of thing. And I mean, I would love, from a creative standpoint, to be able to sit down and storyboard something out for a year. But even in doing that, how disingenuous is it? Because you're not listening to the fans, and you're forcing them into an old mode of thinking that they did back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where you had one feud last for years. Like, for example, Bruiser Brody taking on Kamala. They fought in over 1,000 matches, and those matches went on through a period of 3 to 5 years. You can't do that in the modern climate. The fans will turn off their televisions unless you keep reinventing it, and therein lies the challenge.
Which is, that's the thing that you really have to do. And, like, it's more along the lines of not so much just, like, dragging things out for a year, because that's a horrible idea, and we've seen feuds and rivalries in just the WWE this year that have dragged out too long, and that would be within, like, a month.
Right.
It's really more along the lines of like building up the drama in the sense of giving us a reason to be invested in the match that does eventually take place.
Well, see, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a fascinating thing, and there's ways of doing it. If you have one match a month between these rivals, just one match, one show, leading into a pay-per-view. And then after that, one match, a single match, and then you throw them towards the end of the month, like week 3, week 4, leading into the next pay-per-view, in like a tag team match, against one another, or even teaming them together, which is still somewhat of an overused and very much cliche, gimmicky kind of concept in and of itself.
Yeah.
But if you limit their interactions in the ring, have it more, like promo based or run-ins to affect the outcome of a match, that sort of thing, when done and done effectively, that's how you sustain it through a long-term period, as opposed to them fighting every single week, and then by the time of the pay-per-view, the fans are completely burned out. But they don't do that anymore. In fact, that harkens back to God, AWA, WCCW, NWA, Georgia Championship, Florida. I mean, all of them. And that's why you have to understand the history of the sport and see what worked and what didn't, and when it worked, do it again, because everything's being recycled over and over again. And the only thing that's making it new is the characters and the perspective and the persona that they bring to it. So, there are opportunities, but let's try and shift to the next thing. But no, I think ultimately, I'm fine with creative getting pissed off. I want them pissed off if they're finally going to do their jobs and try and come up with something that doesn't.
Creative actually gets creative, then that's fine by me.
Yeah, I just think that's just such a silly thing to even let surface. But we're going to be talking about breaking kayfabe here in a minute, which could have been done in Monday Night Raw show, and it was breaking kayfabe and the idea of breaking kayfabe, but it was still just a work in and of itself. And I don't know that I like it, and we're going to discuss that one a little in depth. But let's go ahead and move on so we can, we don't run long and everything. Okay, so the Usos, I don't know, man. I know that the Usos, them having the title, it was a gimme. It's a give and go. It's all right, we're putting the title on you, but here in 2 weeks, you're coughing it up to who we want to have it, but at least you're going to have, bragging rights and saying, hey, we held the title. I hate those kinds of situations. It's disingenuous.
I hate that situation for these guys because they're pretty much the perfect tag team. Like, particularly for this era. Like, they're really good, and
if you quantify it in the era, yes, because they have every attribute that you are wanting in this era of wrestling. They're smaller framed, more agile, more athletic. They're willing to do the high spots, capable of doing the high spots, not afraid of injuring themselves, but ultimately that's much to their detriment. All of that. The whole laundry list I just gave you of everything that's good about them is everything that's going to take their career that could last 20, 30 years in the business and cut it in half because of which. But so if you quantify it in this era, sure, yeah. They represent, this new mode. But a lot of us, unfortunately, are still stuck in the 80s. Well, shit, it actually goes back to the 60s, really. I mean, well, further back, the 40s, because you had big guys. And let me just justify it by what Jim Cornette said, and I was going to say this for the new segment later. But Jim Cornette, in talking about how the Bromans got beat up by Bully Ray, he was talking about, those guys don't elicit fear in me. Those aren't some shit kickers. How can I fear them as your tag team champion? And see, we want that bigger guy, that swolled up guy, that intimidates that absolute hell out of someone.
Right, like you think in terms of world tag team champions, guys like Legion of Doom,
demolition, skyscrapers, the Twin Towers,
Natural
whomever.
disasters, even.
Right. I mean, the list goes on and on. But then you had those rarities like the Midnight Rockers, the Midnight Express, the Uzos, even the Hart Foundation, which weren't that big in stature.
No, by comparison, no.
So, then you have those rarities that come by, and because of their skill and their prowess and their in-ring ability, they can jump the shark without jumping the shark, meaning that they can, people's like, because ultimately you're trying to suspend this disbelief. You're wanting to believe this is real. But throwing the Usos up against a King Kong Bundy and Andre the Giant, they're getting squashed. There's no way that you're going to have a Rey Mysterio giant killer moment. It's not going to happen. So if you quantify it in this era, yes, I will agree wholeheartedly with you. But from the broader standpoint, and unfortunately, McMahon's right in that respect because you want those bigger guys. You're 6'5", 270 or plus, kind of archetype to build off of because they are intimidating and they do lend credibility to any belt they hold without even stepping into a ring. So I wish it for the Usos, and they definitely deserve it. But it's a give and go, and I hate it. It robs from them. It robs of the title and the history behind which, and it doesn't help. But right now, given the climate, because there's really no big guys other than Ryback and Curtis Axel, who's actually jobbing. And that's just an ironic twist of events that your two biggest guys in your tag team division are jobbing out to the smaller guys. So I found that to be quite ironic. But okay, so let's go ahead and transition over. Slam City.
Kind of surprised by the existence of this thing, really.
Not so much, because this harkens back to the 80s. You remember the wrestling?
It's definitely rock and roll wrestling.
Right. So, and also with them in the Scooby-Doo movie, and there's actually a couple other cartoon movies that WWE is working on top of like Hornswoggle doing the Leprechaun movie, and everything. WWE always branches out, and then they're diversified. It's not just wrestling anymore. In some respects, that's great, and it gives the wrestlers, or the athletes rather, a lot more opportunities. Wrestling, their life isn't defined by that ring anymore. Say they get injured, and they have to retire, they can still stay within the company, but work in different areas through the company. Be it cartoons, doing voiceovers, movies, etc., etc. So I love that aspect of it. So I don't think it's much of a crazy shift of the business model for them. I think they've always tried to, branch out in this respect, and it's good to see that they're doing it again. In fact, I think honestly, just as the rock and roll wrestling back in the 80s, which I grew up on, I was a little bit too old for it at that point, but I still found it, entertaining. I mean, it was a reflection of the climate at the time. I like to see this, and just as, that sort of thing ushered in the second golden age of wrestling, I think that this can usher in the third golden age of wrestling. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's like the fact that it actually is coming to fruition right now says a whole lot about just the general business model of the WWE as it stands, and the fact that it is really starting to get back to where it was back when I was a kid, which it's not quite as over the top and colorful as it was back in the 80s, but at the same time, like, the sensibility is there.
Really?
And that's what, like, in terms of, like, the overall presentation, yeah, I would think so.
even the characters are becoming. Sorry to interrupt. I think even the characters are fitting back into that specific niche, if you would, like uh, your Koloff, your Iron Sheik. You know, you got that one. What's his name?
Yes, and like my thing is that I think that, and this is just me personally coming from this standpoint. Like I feel like I won't really come to that full conclusion on my part until I see a Coco Beware. And I know that's ridiculous, but that's just where I stand.
No,
Like, until we see a guy come out to the ring with a parrot, I don't think we're quite there.
actually, I think that TNA jumped the shark in the sense that they did what WWE couldn't do in this light and ushering in the third golden age of wrestling. They brought in a mannequin, but we'll get to that later. Oh man, I saw that and I'm like, yeah, all the work, all the writing that went into that, you might as well just send him on down to Chuck E. Cheese because his career in wrestling is over at this point. You know, it's the Al Snow moment, and it didn't work then, and it's not going to work now, and you just killed a character. You killed a wrestler. Unless you put a mask on.
Will never be taken seriously again.
Oh, hell no. Hell no. But we're going to talk about that here in a couple of minutes. Okay. No, so I like, the incorporation of Slam City. I think, I think it's yet another of many signs that we are moving into that third golden age of wrestling, which, depending on your opinion, because I listen to all the podcasts. I even listen to, I wouldn't call them rivals or competition, just other people, that got the itch, like we have the itch and wanted to have a podcast. I listen to theirs just to see where their heads are on certain things and how their format is for their show. I look at it more analytically, but also for content as well. And with the I don't know, man. I just like with the a lot of them are saying, and even wrestlers, former wrestlers like Conan and among others, they're just bashing. I mean, straight bashing the product that's out there right now. And I mean, in certain respects, yeah, I see it and I get it. But there too, I think it's completely, and I keep saying this week in and week out, it's disingenuous because they're not looking at the totality. Every little thing, every piece that had to be in place to set up a golden age of wrestling. Because the golden age of wrestling during the 40s and 50s, and then from the 80s to 90s, it wasn't just an American thing. It was a global thing. Because back in the 40s and 50s and 80s and 90s, Japan was just blowing up. Mexico was blowing up as it's starting to now. Now we're still,
and now we're starting to see bridges connecting way more so than we did back then.
Right. Well, there too, because actually, funny enough, and I hate that it never happened. And this is an article I'm actually doing the research for right now. Back when Vince McMahon bought the rights to the ECW and WCW, before he just cut ties with, what was ultimately deemed liabilities, the wrestlers. He kept the good ones. The rest he gave their pink slips, their walking papers. But before he did that, he had the idea, and I still think it would have worked. You can laugh at me and fans. You can cuss me on the blog or on the Facebook page or email me because that's fine. I get where you're coming from. But hear me out. He had the idea of taking all these wrestlers from WCW, ECW, WWE, kind of like what they did with the Invasion kind of thing, but instead of doing it as a prolonged kind of storyline, just have a one-night pay-per-view and call it the Super Bowl of wrestling, and have your Sting versus Undertaker, all those dream matches. But it never got off the ground, and I still think that would have been a beautiful thing. Well, it can still happen now. Granted, not with Sting, even though and this is something that's not in the format, but there's rumors that he has already signed with WWE, and there's it's a he said she said kind of thing. It's like, and I hate articles like that. It's just blind speculation, and it has no credit to it. So if you have no legitimacy to what you're saying, why are you saying it? Don't say it. Wait until you can confirm it. But anyway, so it dropped last night. What was it? ProWrestling.com, I believe it was, or .net. I think they, posted the article, but they're saying, well, sources inside the WWE said Sting has signed. Meanwhile, other people within the WWE have said, no, he hasn't. Then if you can't confirm it, why even say? Why even bring it to
You don't have anything to report. What are you saying?
Right. It's like Fox News. It's just like, and I'm not trying to bash on Fox News. I mean, granted, there's plenty to bash them for, but that's not my intent here. I just don't understand the logic in doing that, other than to just draw attention to yourself. And if that's the case, well, congratulations, you did, but at what cost? You have no credibility at this point. It's just like, okay, so what should I believe Sting or what? I don't know. It's like, what the hell? But anyways, we're getting really sidetracked. But going back to the golden age of wrestling, like right now, specifically, wrestling like Wrestle One in New Japan, New Japan's joining up with ROH. Wrestle One joining up with TNA. WWE has expressed interest. In fact, they're signing new TV deals over in Germany, England. They're still on a 5-year planning, or in the 5-year planning phase to bring wrestling to China. So you can have this coming together, which was needed as it was in the first and second golden age of wrestling. Not only to legitimize the sport, because really in what was it called? Battle. What was it back in the 90s? What was the Battle Brawl? Where the WWE wrestlers actually fought each other with gloves.
Oh no, the Brawl for All.
Yeah, Brawl for All, that's it. Yeah, it's not going to, I mean, at the end of the day, you want to suspend disbelief and believe that wrestling is real, and in a lot of ways it is, because of the in-ring psychology and because of the damage that is inflicted. Does the WWE, or even wrestling in general, have to transition to that point again? And the answer is hell no, because then you'll have another Brawl for All. And that was just the worst kind of television imaginable, if any of you ever watched it. And if you haven't, guys, I
unfortunately did. And
yeah.
Oh man, that feels like a discussion in and of itself. But
please. That's for another day, because we could actually base a whole show on that and the stories that came out of which. But going back on point though, or my point specifically, is that wrestling, when you bring in these different guys from different, countries and whatever, cultures, etc., you give it a level of legitimacy, you give it back, you lend it that credibility, you lend it that air of suspense, like it takes on an austere kind of thing, in and of itself, where it draws you in, because you don't know. Whereas before it was cookie cutter and you knew who was going to win. You bring in, say, some Russians that are well trained in sambo. You bring in some guys from Japan that are well trained in jiu-jitsu or judo, Muay Thai, etc. Just because of the diversity, it removes you from that natural thought process of, oh, so-and-so's going to win. You don't know. And see, that's the great thing about UFC. On any given day, yeah, you might have your favorite, but you just don't know if they're going to do it. You just don't know. And that's what draws you in. And then once you're drawn in, you're more readily available to that psychology. And once that psychology washes over you, you're hooked. You're hooked. And so you need that kind of climate, which we're actually transitioning into. And I said it in past shows, I'll keep saying it. We are on the verge of a third golden age of wrestling because of it. Because all these pieces are coming together. The fact that wrestling is popping over in Japan, it's popping in Mexico again. Booker T's own wrestling company just got a TV deal. Harley Race's run his own wrestling company, and they're doing pretty good. You know, you got all these elements, and they're coming together. Jeff Jarrett's about to launch his right after WrestleMania. He's going to get that big news after WrestleMania. You know, so I understand where people are saying that, you know, the product isn't great right now. It wasn't in the 80s either. I mean, you had your top-notch guys in squash matches with jobbers. I mean, really? You had like 2-minute matches. I was watching on the network earlier, the Road Warriors running in and just beating up a couple jobbers. And the interview, the post-match interview, lasted longer than the match itself. But that was the lead-in match to the main event. That's your hype match to get the crowd up. You know, so I mean, really, you got to look at it from that standpoint. Are all the matches going to be, or even the booking, going to be, you know, 100%? Like you had shades of, like during WCW, during the Monday Night Wars, where the mid card, you know, your openers and then your mid card were just solid as hell. But your big story, you know, the emphasis was more placed, rightly or wrongly, depending on your perspective, on your main event, like the NWO versus the Horsemen, the NWO versus whomever, Randy Savage, Hogan, you know, whatever. But because you had, you know, you're not going to get that sustained beginning to end kind of show all the time. And the fact that WCW could do that by loose booking a show, which they were notoriously known for, was a miracle in and of itself. And that means the credit goes in large part to your mid-carders, your Chris Jericho's, Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, Chavo Guerrero. You know, those guys that made that transition. But we're getting back to that point. Even though it's not 100% great booking or main event booking, you know, it's still around like a 60-40 kind of booking. And that's still not that bad if you look at it from, you know, through that particular lens. So I think we are very much on the cusp of that third golden age of wrestling.
That's literally the word that I was thinking of.
Right. But it's not just an American thing, it's a Japan thing, a Mexican thing. You know, it has to be full on. And and we're getting back to that point if you follow more than just what's being done here. And even in Britain and Ireland and Scotland, they got some legitimate guys over there. I follow a lot of these guys for the Facebook page and on Twitter, and I've talked to several of them, and I'm really liking what I'm hearing and seeing out of them because they're hungry. And when you get guys hungry enough, they'll impress the shit out of you just to maintain the spot. And if you can get back to that kind of mentality, as opposed to being given a 2 or 3 year contract where you can sit at home because creative doesn't have anything for you and you're still drawing a check, well, that's the worst case scenario in and of itself. But if you got guys that are hungry to defend their spot, to go out and put everything on the line, like an AJ Styles when he was coming up, or a CM Punk, among so many others, then yeah, I mean, we definitely are on the cusp of a third golden age of wrestling. But let's transition from that into our next topic point, and 3 guys that are definitely hungry right now and have the skills in ring and out of ring, the Shield. What do you think about the Shield and the whole Corporate Kane storyline right now?
I was actually pleasantly surprised by the face turn. I wasn't expecting it. It felt like it was a long time coming because they were kind of floundering in between in terms of like actual, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to get into like D&D terminology because it's like they're almost like a chaotic neutral for the longest time.
Well, I think that there too, and it's an ironic situation to be put in, and actually it's reminiscent to Steve Austin back during the Attitude Era, if you want to be completely honest about it. In that he could be as nasty as he wanted to be, and even DX during that same era,
Right,
they
and people still loved them.
loved the shit out of them, and they couldn't get enough of it. And that's where McMahon and everybody else at the time said, well, there's no true baby faces or heels anymore. But I mean, you kind of take two steps away from that, but you don't walk completely away because And the only reason I say that is because Vince Russo made it a habit, and it was such a horrible thing, and it made for such a horrible product. I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but just from a creative standpoint and from a writer's standpoint, it was just ridiculous that Vince would have send guys out and act heelish one week, and then the next week come across as baby faces. There was no continuity to it, and the fans didn't know how to react, and ultimately it made the characters suffer, if not the wrestlers themselves. So you can't go too far away. I mean, you can push the envelope and like your DX and your Steve Austins, if they have that innate charisma to sell it, but to sell it, to with mass appeal, in those certain circumstances, you can, push the envelope a little bit further than what you would with someone else that doesn't have, so much charisma or appeal on a broader level. But yeah, I think the Shield are definitely stuck in that mode, and creatives like, oh hell, what do we do?
Well,
So
I think they made the right decision in terms of like who they had them turn against. Because
right.
Kane is very obviously like I wouldn't necessarily say like heel, but like as far as the authority angle is concerned, he seems to be the more obvious heel character through and through. Like
Well,
there have been times where like Triple H and Stephanie have come out and they've done things that kind of try to appeal to the fan base, which weakens them in that respect. But never Kane. He was always the asshole.
right.
So having them turn on him, perfect.
Right. Well, see, and actually, there were rumors, and I don't report on rumors on the page or anywhere, unless I specifically say, hey, this is a rumor. Because I believe I still have some journalistic integrity, as opposed to some within the IWC. They'll just print anything and everything just to draw attention to themselves. But that's off topic somewhat. But there were rumors that Kane was going to turn face, and I thought, from a creative standpoint, that would be the worst thing they could do. If anything, they could just turn the Shield neutral, to use a D&D reference. Not so much a chaotic neutral, but a true neutral, and just leave them there and see how it played out for a month, because you have to let that play out. Because if you bring them right back, you're killing them, because eventually you are going to break them up. Eventually you are going to turn at least one or two, if not all three, face at some point. And in doing so, you can either do it the right way and letting them feel their way through it, through what the fans are wanting from them, or you can do it the wrong way by just automatically turning them, or letting them go a little bit, put their toe in the water and then pulling them right back. I think it kills that opportunity straight out. I could be wrong, but it just seems like it wouldn't translate well. In fact, I could give citations of where it's been done in the past, but we'll say that for another day. I liked what the Shield did. I think it turned out well on Monday night. I mean, it was a little bit predictable, but not as completely predictable as a lot of stuff that's put up on the shows, over the past 10 years. But
You mean like the repeated matches between Sheamus and Christian, which keep turning out the exact same way?
yeah, and actually, and good segue because we're going into that. I think that right now, because of last night, what I wanted to, last night on Raw, I wanted to see where Sheamus came out and looked up at Bad News Barrett on the scaffold after the B&B segment. I wanted to see them have some kind of exchange just to set up just the idea of a possible feud, because I think that the Sheamus Christian thing, it lacks traction. It lacks that nuance that you need to make it something, that the fans buy into. I just don't feel that it's doing that, even though they're beating the
The
dog
problem
piss.
there isn't either of the guys working. It's the fact that Sheamus has won every single one of these matches.
Right. And then Christian comes back and beats the dog piss out of them. And yeah, I mean, it's repetitive. But even still, I mean, you go back to Ric Flair. I mean, he could lose, and he made a career out of it, losing, and yet coming back and still being the victor after the fact because he beat the dog piss out of someone. But there's ways of doing it, and I don't feel that WWE creatives are really exploring that. I think they're just trying to make it like one of these, hit or miss kind of deals. In that, if it doesn't work, well, we'll scrap it here in a week or two, and we'll, put someone else in that spot.
Right.
It carries that kind of weight, and where I have that idea already from a fan's perspective, I'm like, no, you just need to scrap it right now and move on because it's not translating. I don't feel it is. How do you feel?
No, it's not working at all for me.
Okay.
I see what they're trying to do, but if this were ever at any of the pay-per-views, I have no interest in seeing it.
Right. I agree. Okay, let's we gotta shoot through some of these because we are
Although I
running.
do want to just specify that Bad News Barrett is possibly one of the best things happening for WWE, and I really, really, really wanted to do more with that guy.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. I think that they've missed several vital opportunities. Find that this last opportunity, they didn't do it because they didn't want to completely bury Phil, but CM Punk. And I get that, and I respect that on certain levels. But still, at the end of the day, you have to worry about your product. And if you have something that would sell and that would translate, you have to go with it regardless of the backstage politics. Otherwise, you're compromising somebody somewhere. And unfortunately, in this respect, you're compromising the show, you're compromising the overall product, and the wrestlers themselves. Because Bad News Barrett, this thing can only run so long before it gets old, and I'm afraid it's going to get old pretty soon. So
Like long before it actually reaches any full potential.
exactly, and it's like I get that they're slow burning it, and I like how they're doing it. I think creatively they're doing a wonderful job with it because he does draw that cheap heat, and he goes in, consistently and draws that cheap heat, and that's all. That's his role. That's all he's meant to do. Piss off the fans, get a reaction out of them, a visceral reaction, and then we go.
You were just saying in terms of like there never being anything like a pure face or a pure heel. This is the one exception to that rule. He is a pure heel through and through.
Yeah, it could
Which
be.
is a pure heel.
All right, something's wrong with your mic. You keep fading in the background.
Oh, sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. But yeah, I agree. I think that he has every opportunity right now and all the potential in the world to be a great heel. But even I would dare say maybe not so much in ring or even with the in ring psychology as a Roddy Piper, but just that general persona and just drawing that decisive and just total heat. I think he has, every potential for that to take place. But we'll have to wait and see how they do that. Okay, so let's move on. John Cena and the whole Bray Wyatt interview, and really, it wasn't just that. and let's just take a couple minutes and talk about this. I felt like that whole exchange between Cena and Bray Wyatt, even though I love Bray Wyatt. First off, I think John Cena just needs to quit with this mea culpa kind of thing. Like, I understand you all don't like me, but I come out here and I bust my ass. I mean, we've heard it, and we've heard it, and we've heard it. You know,
And it's not changing anybody's mind either.
well, sure, and I mean, ultimately, he's trying to legitimize himself, and I think he did that in previous attempts, but he can't keep doing that. It's done. You have to move on. You have to come up with new shtick, and unfortunately, it hasn't, or he hasn't rather. But on top of that, I just felt like that whole segment was nothing more than a setup for the song that they played. With the lyrics about Bray Wyatt and Cena. I can't remember who it was by, and it really doesn't matter. I just felt like that segment was just there so they could play a song. And if that's the case, they could have gone about it a hell of a lot better, because you're robbing time away from matches or from other segments that could better facilitate the lead into WrestleMania. Now, the same is true, even though I love Paul Heyman. We all love Paul Heyman. He's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. He's money on the mic. You couldn't do any better than Paul Heyman at this point. I mean, dude, he's honed his skills over the years.
He's doing all the work to sell this Undertaker match.
Right, but even on Monday night, it felt like that was just a setup for the video package and nothing more. And when you reduce someone to that level, where they walk out, do like a 2-minute thing, and then throw it immediately to a video packet like that, it cheapens them. It just robs from them, and ultimately, as I felt Monday, and maybe I'm wrong, and you chime in on this, I just felt like it robbed from Paul Heyman, but on top of which it robbed from the build up about Cena, or not Cena, but Undertaker and Brock Lesnar.
I can't really argue to the contrary on that. I feel you're absolutely right in the sense that even if it doesn't take away from it, it doesn't add anything to it, and that in and of itself takes away from it.
Exactly. Actually, share some more about that, because I want your full opinion, because I'm working on an article about that, and I want to know that the voices in my head, as it would be, for lack of a better term, are right on this. Now, and ultimately, I guess what I'm trying to ask you is, in seeing both of them, what worked in those two segments, or didn't work?
That's really tricky, because I feel like what worked more for the Heyman segment was just Heyman himself. Not so much the video. We didn't really need it. And there was one point in the video where the word unmerciless is used. Unmerciless is not a word.
Yeah, I caught that. That was funny, man.
I just kept thinking to myself, unmerciless, does that mean that he is without mercy? I'm not understanding what you're trying to convey here.
Right.
What I'm trying to say is that he will not show mercy, but if you're adding another prefix to it, a negative prefix specifically, then you're saying that it's the dumbest of double negatives I think I've ever seen.
Right.
It irks me more than when people say irregardless.
Right. You cannot not do that, All right.
Does that mean I can do it, or
Exactly. It gives you that ambiguity that just kills whatever you're doing, but that's more of a writer kind of thing, or a creature of art that we come from with our background. So some people don't necessarily pick up on that. We do, and that's why we do the podcast. We bring a different perspective on things. But no, I completely agree with you on that. Now let's go ahead and move on. Now, all right, let's go ahead and deal with the end, and then we got something to just bring the mood back up, because I feel like we've been a little bit harsh, and well, I don't think it's unwarranted by any means. I think we're offering our thoughts and feelings on this, and our perspective as both fans and creatures of the arts, as it were. Go ahead and give me your thoughts on the end of the Raw show.
That segment ran way long. Like, that was 20 minutes. That ran longer than our shows tend to run.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
Like, it was literally just watching Triple H with a microphone talk and talk and talk, and then set up this BS trap so that way he can then just proceed to beat the snot out of Daniel Bryan, which I totally get in the sense of like that being an effective way of getting him over with fans in terms of like being the underdog in these matches. Okay, it did not have to be 20 minutes. Like, everything that was being conveyed in that segment easily could have been done within 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Triple H, actually, it was kind of a swerve, and it kind of worked on one level, and then on another level it didn't work, which we'll get into. Where Triple H set it up early in the show that he just wanted to go out and talk to Daniel, and then he was acquiescing to Daniel Bryan, saying, I respect you, this, that, and the other, and just downplaying himself, and it just seemed like he was humbling himself, throwing himself on the sword, as it would be, for Stephanie, and then also for Bryan, saying, hey, I respect you, I didn't want it to come to this point, let's try and work this out. And then that in and of itself was a swerve, or built, setting up the swerve where he just, was in cahoots with Stephanie, and this was just an elaborate setup to beat the dog piss out of him. On that level, I felt like it worked creatively, but then when you had this fake chair shot to the head up against the pole, I mean, yeah, WWE has outlawed, headshots.
Yeah, it's like direct headshots with the chair that's off the table.
Right, and I respect that, but if you're going to try and sell that imagery, you have to sell the imagery. And although I will say this much, in watching that play out, I do think that the whole commentary aspect of it was contrived, and it didn't feel natural. You could tell it was scripted. It didn't, that's not how people talk, but and as a writer, you write all this stuff out, like all this dialogue, and you're like, oh, this is brilliant. And then to see someone do it, to try and say it in the way that you have it framed within your mind, it's not going to translate. It's not going to carry that weight that you would hope of it. And therein lies, the challenge of any writer that writes dialogue, be it for TV, movie scripts, for fiction, what have you. So that aspect of it did feel contrived, and I felt like it was starting to take away. But I felt like it regained it through the elaborate nature of beating the dog piss out of Daniel Bryan, and here's why. As I was watching that, I couldn't help, and really going back to the imagery of it all, just with the long hair and the beard, and Bryan being just so skinny and everything, I felt like I was watching The Last Temptation of Christ all over again. The movie where it was 2.5, 3 hours worth of just people taking turns beating the dog piss out of Jesus, and it just it had that moment, it had that connection, and whereas maybe I'm the only one that felt that way, and I'm definitely want your thoughts on that as well. But whereas I felt that I was like, if that translated on a broader level or larger level, then that was beautiful, and that's a perfect lead-in because first you set up uh, the potential swerve of, well, we didn't think that Triple H was, well, we knew Triple H wasn't going to win the match between him and Bryan at WrestleMania. But then, by what Triple H did in the beginning of the show, throwing that swerve in, like, oh, hell, maybe. Just maybe. It gives you that inkling of doubt. Even though you know it's not going to happen, there's still that inkling of doubt, which gives you that little added uh, push of interest. Like, that'd be kind of interesting to see how they play this out. Because potentially, and this does still exist, potentially Bryan doesn't win the title at WrestleMania. Granted, McMahon always wants to send the fans home from a WrestleMania happy. I mean, that's just the rule of thumb. However, given the climate right now and the toxicity of the fans to the product relationship, this would be a perfect opportunity just to screw with them and just generate such overwhelming heat for, especially for the corporation, the authority. But the authority harkens back.
It's the corporation. We can still technically call it that.
Right, and it has such shades of which, especially now and moving forward, it completely has shades of that. So, and that's why I say that maybe, just maybe, they don't put the title on Bryan, but send it to SummerSlam where he does take on Batista or does take on Triple H in a rematch for the title. So they might let it linger out, to SummerSlam. And I think if they did that, that could be brilliant because then you're propping SummerSlam up for a higher buy rates than what WrestleMania is going to garner. And I think that would be beautiful because fans are going to, buy SummerSlam or even, what's the other one? SummerSlam and the, I'm having a brain fart. You know what I'm talking about. So going into, one of those, if they let it linger out to that point, that'd be brilliant in and of itself. Will it piss a lot of people off? Sure. But they know that, and they can play off of it, and they can cultivate that into, buzz. And so, by Triple H setting it up to, like that at the beginning of the show and then ended it with the last, you got hiccup, the last Temptation of Christ kind of deal, I think, this has the potential to be huge. And it can be a swerve. I could be completely wrong, and a lot of people are going to be like, "But dude, he's got to win." And I get you. I mean, I want to see Bryan win too, but I want to see him win it and in such a way that it's going to translate into a sustained run with the championship rather than a give and go, which it can potentially still be. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, and my only concern on this front would be whether or not they've actually made fans disappointed for far too long and then have to basically put the belt on him now as opposed to being able to hold out a little bit longer.
But therein lies the rub, don't you think? Because whereas everybody already expects him to get the belt, it kind of takes away from him actually getting it. It's not that Eddie Guerrero moment where he finally, after years and years of struggle, finally gets that belt. And when he does, the freaking arena just explodes because, yeah, you wanted him to have it, but you didn't go into that pay-per-view believing that he was going to win the belt. But he did. And so, the whole place erupted. And I feel like it's somewhat disingenuous to just slap it on Bryan at WrestleMania with the knowing that they have to. They're being forced into it. I'd much rather see him get that opportunity to win it, to legitimately win it. And we talked about this last week. And because if you're going to keep the belt on him, which the fans seem to want, a sustained run with him having the belt, you're going to have to give it to him in such a manner that it translates out beyond the predictability of slapping it on him.
Yeah, it has to be like a true moment where he legitimately, like, full on earns it, and then that's it. He's set.
Exactly. Exactly. So I think that as even though the end of the show ran long, um, I still liked it. I mean, I thought it served its purpose. It made for good TV, other than the chair shot. I think slamming him on the table, where he did suffer a legitimate injury, the extent of which has not been leaked out, which is somewhat surprising. But you heard him screaming out in pain, and that wasn't fake. That was real. But let's go ahead and touch upon this, because I referenced it earlier. The whole breaking kayfabe, when the cops came in and arrested him, and the Triple H used the kayfabe law to set up the gimmick, the swerve, as it were, and saying, leave him alone, leave him alone. You're not even real cops. I mean, you're like, oh shit, really? You just broke kayfabe, you son of a bitch. What the hell are you doing? And as a true wrestling fan, that's one of those moments where you suck in air. You're like, and because that's just the ultimate taboo, and when you do that, it destroys everything. Because again, you want to suspend disbelief, but when you break kayfabe, it shatters that everything you built to suspend disbelief. But I think it translated well. How do you feel about that? Do you think it worked? Okay. All right. I think, oh, he's probably having some mic issues. That's fine. We'll go ahead and move on. We'll come back to that. So, fans, I tell you what, this is, I mean, it's kind of expected, and I'm actually glad this happened. Mr. T is finally getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. And funny enough, Roddy Piper tweeted out today that he was going to be the one that introduces Mr. T. And as ironic as that is, I don't think that it would happen. I'd love to see it. That would make for great TV. But in hearing that, I shared this on the Facebook page, and if you didn't get a chance to listen to it, I'm going to play something for you. It's a blast from the past, and I think that you're going to enjoy it. It's Mr. T doing this funny little thing called Treat Your Mother Right. Give me 1 second. And here we go. Enjoy.
"12? You couldn't be more than 5. You're so fat they have to jack you up to take off your shoes. Yeah, well, you're so skinny your eyes are in single file. Well, you're so ugly your ears stick out to get away from your face. Well, your mama is so...
Wait a minute. Don't bring anyone mother into this. She ain't here. If it wasn't for your mother, you wouldn't be here. So remember, when you put down one mother, you're putting down mothers all over the world.
Treat your mother right. Treat her right. Treat her right. Treat her right. Treat your mother right. Treat her right. Treat her right.
Mother, there is no other like mother, so treat her right. Mother, I always love her. My mother, so treat her right. Treat her right. Image for the moan and the miserable groan from the pain that she felt when I was born. Always for the oven with the burning heat, where she stood making sure I had something to eat. Tears for the time that she stayed up at night and took my temperature when I wasn't feeling right. Exes for the hard-earned money she spent to keep clothes on my back and try to pay the rent. Ease every wrinkle I put on her face and every worry that I caused when I stayed out late. The last set of hours that she taught me respect and for the room up in heaven that I know she'll get. Mother, there is no other like mother, so treat her right. Mother, I always love her. My mother, so treat her right. Treat her right.
Treat her right.
she's a green, second to none. Take care of mother, you only get one.
Treat her right, treat your mother right. Treat her right, treat her right. Treat her right, treat your mother right. Treat her right, treat her right.
Mother, there is no other like mother, so treat her right. Mother, I always love her. My mother, so treat her right, treat her right.
Alrighty.
Okay. Full disclosure, for 2 years in a row, I shared that on my mom's Facebook page for Mother's Day.
Are you serious?
Oh, it's the best thing ever. I love that so much.
Man, I tell you what,
That is actually from a video called Be Somebody or Be Somebody's Fool, which is damn near impossible to find nowadays, but that particular gem stands out.
oh, that's classic right there, man. That's just great, guys. I only played a portion of it. The rest of it is on the Facebook page. Definitely check that out, the full thing. It's hilarious. If you couldn't hear it real well, I apologize. My speakers aren't the greatest, but I tried. Man, I tell you what, that was some funny stuff right there. I am happy that he is getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. I think it's justified. And anything to give him a payday, so that he doesn't ever have to sing or rap again, I'm okay with. I love Mr. T. B.A. Barack is from the 18. I grew up on that stuff, so that's nostalgia for me. But also, I think it ties into what we were talking about earlier about the setup for a third golden age of wrestling, where you had like the Chicago Bears with the, doing their whole thing, and then the wrestlers at the time build off of that culturally and say we're going to do our own thing. And then also Vince McMahon doing a song on, what song was it? I can't even remember what song he did. But anyway, so I think the culture and the timing is, because everything is cyclical in nature, and we do, everything comes back around. I think we're at that, again, we're on the cusp of a third golden age of wrestling, where this kind of outlandish or this, larger-than-life characterization of the characters, is just, it's hokey, but it does serve a purpose in getting mass, appeal, and I think, like with what the WWE is doing right now, but also in conjunction with, Japan, AAA wrestling down in Mexico, even, over in England as well, some of those guys over there, it's building, and we're about to enter the third golden age of wrestling, and I'm looking forward to it because I think it's going to be good for both the WWE as well as for the fans and then just everybody else that's involved. But we're running long, so we're going to have to save some of the stuff till next week, and I do apologize, fans. But we were actually a little bit cavalier in trying to get as much stuff in as we wanted. But so let's go ahead and just quickly touch upon TNA, and then we'll probably close the show and just save the rest of the stuff for next week. So the new bits that I was going to introduce tonight, I might actually just do a solo podcast, or Marquez, if you're free tomorrow or later in the week, we may try and do a second podcast just so we can get this content in when it's relatively, fresh and still in the news. But we can discuss that later. But yeah, let's go ahead and shift over to TNA. Now, last week I suggested that, and actually I suggested in a previous article as well, it's the one that you can find on smarkoutmoments.com, where I said that the sky is the limit for any up-and-coming wrestling promotion right now. And I got a lot of backlash. I'm not going to lie to you. I had people cussing me and saying I'm an idiot, this, that, and the other. They basically said everything to me except you're right on, and that's fine. Everybody's got an opinion and they're entitled to it. Now specifically, let's deal with the numbers, and I'm trying to do this briefly. Yeah, for your production costs, you're paying out, and like for example, TNA and what they're going to have to pay out uh, this summer is within the range of 100,000 per show. But there's ways around that, and you have to be willing to try and explore new technologies and other ways like TNA is trying to do, and taping multiple shows in one venue on the same day. How that's going to translate, because that's like at least 4 to 6 hours worth of wrestling. And if you keep the same fans in there, they're going to get a little bit tired after a while, and the buzz is not, and the pops aren't going to be what you want. So that's not going to make for good television. But there's ways around it. You can filter some people in and some people out, and that way you get at least a half reaction, something like that. But also there's a lot more of these independent promotions that I've been following on, just keep up to speed on where they're at and what they're trying to do to tackle issues like the money side of it. And there are ways doing the iPay per views, doing your shows on YouTube, or doing your shows on the internet. You're cutting costs. Granted, you're not getting any kind of TV deal, but you are ultimately cutting costs in certain capacities. So there are ways of doing this, and you just have to be willing to try this sort of thing and to break out of the mode that, or the model, the business model specifically, that the WWE has set up. Again, nobody can outdo the WWE at being the WWE. And even if you were to try, you have to be cavalier in nature, which a lot of these guys aren't. I mean, flat out. In fact, I'm trying to help one right now in fundraising money just to keep their promotion alive in the Boston market. I don't know all the details, and that's okay. There's ways of sustaining it, without compromising too terribly much. I mean, are you going to have to give up on the big stadiums? Obviously. Or on even the big halls like TNA is going to be doing, up in New York. You can go to other areas, and then further on that, you take your product abroad. There is no reason for these indie promotions not to go to the markets. They can't bring the markets here. To get, to do that, you have to have the TV rights. You have to have the international TV rights. And those are hard to come by unless you're one of the top dogs or you have a product that's going to translate really, really well. Which starting out, you're not. It's a growing process. So you have to make certain adjustments. And right now, a lot of them are missing the boat. India is ripe. And where that country is so poor, and this is nothing against India, by any stretch of the imagination, it's just where their country is so poor, you would have to pay $100,000 per show here or even in New York. It'd be like $10,000 in India, if that, because they're so poor, and the U.S. dollar stretches a hell of a lot farther there than it does here. So you go over there, and plus the fact that it's a built-in market. It truly is a built-in market. These fans, for the past 15, 20-some years, love, high-impact, physical kind of action, be it boxing, be it MMA, be it wrestling. And they made the mistake once, back in 2010, where they tried to go with MMA. They gave up on ring kicking, thinking that Rinky King was going to phase out as MMA, caught on more. So they put all their eggs in that basket, and then ultimately they pissed the bed. But again, we talked about it last week, and it bears repeating. Um, they there was a recent wrestling show over there that had a higher rating than any one given Raw or Nitro or any of them or Impact in the past 10 years. Now that says something, and that's something for those within the business on whatever level that do follow the page and do listen in. You need to take seriously. I mean, if you're trying to grow something out of nothing, because it's hard as hell to grow a mom and pop kind of promotion here in the United States. Why not take it somewhere else where you already have a built-in market? It doesn't make sense to me. But there are opportunities if you're willing to take those risks. Even Vince McMahon has multiple times taken huge risks with WrestleMania in trying to come back and bounce back after the steroids scandal, the legal ramifications that came from which, the loss of fans because of which. On top of going into the Attitude Era, there was no guarantee that was going to work. And even now, where it's more PG, almost PG-13 in nature, because USA and even their promoters want, or their corporate sponsors rather, want something that's going to have more of a family appeal. They're kowtowing to that because they want that money. Obviously, who doesn't? Because that's how you sustain yourselves and your families. So, even in taking that was a huge risk. Going from the Attitude Era to the PG era, there are still a lot of fans that are stuck in that mode where they want that kind of content, but they're not getting it. And
I hear it every day, honestly.
Yeah. I know, and same here, because I'm, you know me, I'm on all the blogs, on the, I guess, spot on different, podcasts throughout the weeks. I'm out there and I'm hearing and listening to people, and I'm filtering it for myself. And so Vince McMahon has taken multiple risks, and they're not calculated risks. How can you calculate, investing all your money, you're putting your house into, putting your house up as collateral for a WrestleMania? Well, you had no guarantee at that time when the buy rates for like the Super Clash and the other events through the period, they were making moderate, money, but nothing on the scale that Vince was banking on. But the fact that it paid off, he took these risks, and you have to be willing to take these risks. So I hurt for these small promotions that are stuck in wanting to be the WWE or to achieve that level of success when you can't. The climate isn't set up for that. So you have to adapt, and you have to cultivate that technology. And right now the technology is growing hand over fist. This has only been, 10, 15 years, and it's still growing. And to where you can stream everything online, and you don't have to worry about as much. You can, instead of using 7 to 10 cameras, you can do 3 or 4. Doesn't it affect the product? Sure, but not really. It just depends on how you go about it. And so when people bash TNA and what they're trying to do, it kills me, because they're at least making the attempt. Granted, some of the moves they're making aren't that great right now, and we're going to get into that. Specifically, continuity. Let me go ahead, and I'm not going to do this as a special piece, but I'm going to get your thoughts on this as well, since we already touched upon it earlier, and we'll just close the show with this. So I got into a Twitter war with TNA Creative. I believe it was Friday. I didn't get to watch Impact until the next day, or it could have even been Saturday. But ultimately, I posted after I watched it, I was like, where's the continuity? How can you have your tag team and, an division darling in Zema Ion, all three get beat up by Bully Ray. Do you not delegitimize your tag team champions, the tag team division, the wrestlers, or even their characters by doing that? Well, TNA responded, creative responded back, well, in his defense, he jumped him. Yeah, but big freaking whoop, he jumped him. It's like
start that way sometimes, and they'll still lose.
Right, and it's like trying to say that what's the little bull guy? What's his name? The little bull that comes out with Los
Torito.
Yeah, El Torito. It's like El Torito coming out and beating up on the Road Warriors. Just because he jumped them doesn't mean he's going to beat the dog piss out of them. Okay, the Road Warriors going to turn around, look at him like, really, and beat the dog piss right out of him. So there's no continuity to it, and it's just, I hate when they do this sort of thing because they delegitimize the sport and everything that it has been leading up until now, and it feeds into every criticism, as harsh and as vile as they are by Jim Cornette towards TNA, and I don't get it. And granted, I mean, there are some people that love Vince Russo, and there are some people that absolutely hate him, like Jim Cornette. And I think in this respect, where Vince Russo is back, and he definitely has a hand in this, the storylines at this point. This reeks of Russo, and it's a bad reek, because at the end of the day, I mean, what were Russo's? What did he bring to the table? Yeah, he tried to get more of the guys that were being squashed in the back due to politics, due to whatever, try to get them into the stories. And kudos to him for that, and he's been, strong with that, from his time in WWE to WCW, back to WWE, to TNA, left for a while, back to TNA now, currently. He always tries to do that, but to what end? If you're writing bad shit, it's still bad shit. Stop it. You have to have a level of continuity to it. And you have to respect the place, because, especially for your tag team champions, because back during the territorial days, if you were going to push someone for a major title, and now that you got the WWE Network, fans, please go and watch some of this stuff. Go watch Smoky Mountain when the network finally put Smoky Mountain up there. I wish there was more from like Mid-South and Florida Championship or Georgia Championship. Watch some of the old WCCW, AWA. Anytime that you had a guy that was going to be pushed for a major belt and for a sustained title run, they would first have to go through one, if not both, of your tag team champions, and it happened like clockwork over and over again, and it worked. It worked well. Because if you could push them over one, if not both of your tag team champions, you knew that guy was legit. And you have to build them up through that process. So when you come in, it's like breaking kayfabe. When you have one guy come in and beat the dog piss out and leave, your tag team champions laying on the floor, you might as well go ahead and piss on them. Because that's ultimately what you did. You gave them a golden shower, and you might as well chuck them on out the door, because they had no credibility left. Not in the company, and probably for their career. You turn someone like a Brian Lawler into a Sky Too Hottie, into, whatever their freaking name was. You make clown shoes.
Like the Grandmaster Sexay,
yeah.
Basically. Like, he's a joke angle now.
Yeah, and same with Samuel Shaw. And this is the one that pissed me off the most, because they spent, a month and a half, 2 months, turning him into the psycho kind of guy, and some people found it laughable, other people, it was starting to gain traction. It really was, and I say that because, it's kind of ridiculous in nature, but if you commit to it, you can eventually sell it, if you commit to it, and TNA seem to want to, commit to it. Give them the time timing that they put and the effort they put into it. And then what happens? Thursday night, he's supposedly talking to Christy Hemme backstage. You can't see Christy Hemme, which kind of, builds the illusion even further, like this was some elaborate act and where she's running from him, but secretly she wants him. Yeah, soap opera kind of bullshit, but welcome to wrestling, or sports entertainment in the modern age. But that's a whole nother story for another day. But and then so Samuel Shaw finally reveals as he's coming out to the ring, it's a freaking mannequin, a mannequin. What the hell are you doing, TNA? What the hell are you doing? He's done. You might as well just knock him down and piss all over him and send him packing, because his career is done. He has no credibility at this point. I don't care how you try to repackage him. You can put lipstick on a pig, it's still a fucking pig. And that's what you did to this man. And you did to his career. And to the gimmick and to the fans that were starting to buy into it. And this also reeks of Vince Russo, who doesn't care about wrestling, doesn't care about the history or, the nuances that go into scripting, wrestling. And
yeah, because what that is a poor attempt at making a reference to the movie Maniac. I get it. I like the movie. I don't think it works in the realm of professional wrestling.
No, because ultimately Samuel Shaw was kind of like a Dexter play off of. Dexter, the show, if you're all familiar with that.
And in that nature, he's automatically a different kind of quote-unquote creepy serial killer type of character, as opposed to the guy that's in the movie Maniac.
Right,
so, even trying to conflate the two, it just doesn't make any sense. It was a bad move.
It was. It lacks continuity. Again, you might as well just piss on him and send him packing, or shit on him. And I'm really trying to watch my language, because I've cursed in every podcast, and I'm not wanting to keep doing that. But I mean, I don't know how else you'd say it. You shit on him. You drop trowel right there and just you dirty Sanchez all over the dude. All right, and it's just or a Cleveland Steamer for that matter, all over the dude, and the fans as well. When you do something like that, you're not only doing it to someone that goes in, day out, and takes the bumps, takes the injuries, runs the roads, spends less and less time with his family, with friends, whatever, because he's doing something that he loves. You're not only doing it to him and through all the effort he's put into it, but you're doing it to the fans. Because, you start to build a story and you start, cultivating the psychology involved in it, and then you do something like this with a goddamn mannequin, of all things. And it wasn't meant to be funny like Al Snow got head. It wasn't supposed to be ironic like that, because that worked, but only for a minute, and then Al Snow lost all credibility in and of himself, through which. And it was a bad move on his part in allowing it, or even coming up with the idea. I mean, it had traction for a little bit, and he grew off of it, but then it got old, and then when he had to come back to a point of credibility, it wasn't there. He went from being a mid-carder to a jobber overnight, because of which, and that's in essence what you've done to Samuel Shaw. And I don't get it, TNA, because you have every opportunity, as Jim Cornette has said. You at one time you had the money, you had the TV deal, because you fought like hell through the first few years of your existence on pay-per-view, and the buy-in rates were shit. I don't care who you talk to, they were shit. But because Jeff Jarrett and Jerry Jarrett had the belief and the wherewithal to see this come to fruition as they planned it, they stuck with it. Whereas others within the scope of wrestling from 1900 up until now, were either bought out or sold out or just walked away entirely. But they didn't, and TNA didn't. And that was their claim to fame. They were gutsy. They had that grit, that determination, in the same vein as the WWE. If you're going to beat the WWE, you have to have that grit and that determination. But you also have to have a love of the sport and the tradition that goes into it. And when you do something like this, You show in infinite measures how much you detest the sport. And that's why I hate Vince Russo. I think that he is a piece of shit. Granted, he's brought certain aspects to the table, but when he turns around and does shit like this, or allows his creative team to do shit like this, and even Eric Bischoff, who, also has a hand in this on some level, because these are the guys that have been in the business and know how the business should be ran. Eric Bischoff specifically, going back to his days in AEWA, starting off as an ad guy of all things. But, through luck and happenstance, he worked his way up and, became a writer, commentator, et cetera, et cetera. And even as a commentator, Angry Wrestler, his Facebook page, I like it. And guys, if y'all haven't checked that out, check it out. I know we're running long, and I'm going to wrap this up here in a minute. But, or Angry Vet Wrestler, I think is the name of his page. Check him out. But even he said today, and this is something I've been preaching about for years through my articles, podcasts, whatever venue I have the opportunity to speak on this. I've said it in all of them. If you're going to be a writer, and this is Angry Wrestling Vet shared this as well today. If you're going to be a writer, stay in the back, and if you're not going to stay in the back, go to the commentators table, because you can frame the story that you're trying to build through that venue. And if you're not going to stay at the commentators table, don't get in the ring. You have no reason whatsoever. Vince Russo and Eric Bischoff, Ed Ferrara, none of them ever has a reason to be in the ring. But JR was dragged in, and to meet certain storylines, and in that instance, it works, but it's a rarity. Otherwise, stay at the commentator's table or stay in the back, because these guys bust their ass more than you do. They take the physical damage, they take the wear and tear on their bodies, the stress, the strain, all of it, more so than you as a writer. You need to shut up, you need to listen to them a hell of a lot more, and you need to allow them certain freedoms moving forward, because the business is evolving. And fine, you want to script everything out? Yeah, you can go that route, but it's not going to work, because look at where we're at right now. Fans are disenchanted. We stand on the cusp of something great, something that takes 30 years to build from, one to the next, and we're on the cusp of it. And there's got to be a lot of consideration put into this, and there's got to be a hell of a lot more heart. And it's not necessarily from the guys in the ring, because they're showing their heart day in, day out. And by doing the shit and committing to the shit, that is shit. You can put lipstick on a pig, it's still a damn pig. Stop it. Let wrestling be wrestling. And for those that want sports entertainment, you can do that elsewhere. But leave my wrestling alone. All right, that's my rant for the week. And guys, we are running long. Let's go ahead and quickly do some plugs, and we'll get out of here. Marcus, what do you want to plug this week, brother?
Well, I'm not entirely sure if the film festival is still going, but that's basically what has been keeping Ish relatively busy. So
He's
there's also Marks for Life.
Yes, sir.
Who's definitely been adding and helping us out. And Smark Out Moment.
Yes, sir. All good stuff. Let me go ahead and talk about this real quick. And this is a pet project. Guys, on the Facebook page, I've been sharing this, and I've been spamming out. And I don't think it's spam. I take it to every one of these other wrestling pages just so that they get it directly, instead of, maybe they see it or maybe they don't. And I don't do it every day. I damn sure don't do it every week. I do it every once in a while when there's something that's either worthy of being said or worthy of being noticed. And so I'll take it to all the pages that we share their content on our page free of charge. We don't ask anything of them. We share their stuff because they have something pertinent to offer. And we're not in this for us. I'm not trying to make a name for myself. I'm not a celebrity. I don't want to be a celebrity. Marquez, isn't doing it to gain or to garner any fame and fortune. Would it be nice? Sure, it would, but that's not, our motivation. Same with Ishmael and the rest of the guys that help out on the site and the Facebook page, the podcast, everything that we do. We're not in it for us. We're in it for the fans and for the sport because we love the sport. And we want to share it, but share it through a prism that maybe you're not getting enough of, that being a historical perspective. So it's MWF, and it's Project X, and you can find it at www.indiegogo. So that's INDIEGOGO.com. And they're about to go under, unfortunately, and it's tragic because they've had people go through there. Mick Foley, Iron Sheik, Ted DiBiase, and some of the other greats have gone up there and worked in the Boston area for them, and they've put on a great show for, I think it's 12 years now. But unfortunately, we're in a tough economy. Business has dropped off, and so they're looking for help in trying to sustain the art that they produce. And they're offering stuff in return, autographed pictures, free videos of matches or commentary or interviews that you wouldn't see elsewhere. And they're offering them free right now on their website just to try and bring in people and hopefully get some contributions out of it so that they can sustain, what they've been doing for the past 12 years for another year. And hopefully by that point they can right their ship and, turn a profit and be back on their way. But definitely, if you can, even $10, just, help them out where you can. If nothing else, go ahead and just check out the site and share it amongst your friends and see if you can drum up some help for them, because this is a good cause. We are a community. When one of us gets hurt, we all hurt. When one of us fails, we all fail, because the business by itself needs a lot of diversity and whatnot in order for it to continue to grow and to thrive. Because if you only have one, which is the WWE at this point, you're only getting a small aspect of a larger picture. And so it's definitely worth
you basically
consideration.
get like one view on the entirety of the spectrum, and that's not a good thing ever.
Never. You're right. You're completely right. But so definitely go check it out. It's Project X at www.indiegogo.com. And like I said, if you can help out, I know things are tight, but $10, $20, if you can afford it, by all means, please help out. If you want your voice heard, if you want to see your love and your passion translate over into that ring, this is your opportunity, because you're helping sustain a company that's come upon hard times, and it happens more often than not. But because they believe in what they've done, and because they've committed to 12 years and putting on good shows, they're not willing to just give up without a fight, and that's commendable, and you got to respect that. So if you can help out, I'm not trying to beat you all to death with this or guilt you into it, but if you can help out, by all means, please help out. We appreciate it. I know they definitely will appreciate it. And guys, again, we thank you for tuning in, checking us out. We are growing every day. I got some bookings for some interviews lined up, so that'll be coming over the next couple months. So don't sleep on us. We're growing every day. We're growing in popularity on Twitter, on the Facebook page, even in the views of or the listenings of our podcast. So we're gaining traction, and we're always trying to improve and to offer you the content that you want to hear or the content that you want to see, and giving you more of a complete perspective of the history that has been and will continue to be professional wrestling. So guys, again, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Stay strong, stay up, and until next time, I'll see you at the matches.